Good morning, one and all. I welcome you all to Ganesh IAS Academy. In today's session, we'll be seeing environment-based current affairs from the date November 24th to November 30th, 2023. Let us get into the news articles one by one. The first news that we are going to discuss for today is emissions gap report. So, who has released this emission gaps report and emissions gap report, and what are the key findings of this report? All these details we must have to understand. Let us get into the details. So recently United Nations Environment Program, okay, so it was released by, or it is being released by United Nations Environment Program every year, okay. So it has released a report titled the Emission Gaps Report Broken Record for 2023, okay. So this year they have titled it as Broken Record. So what record have they broken, or what target that they have fixed was not reached? That is what we need to understand, okay. So it states that urgent climate action is crucial to avoid alarming trajectory of temperature rise. So they have given utmost importance to temperature rise in this particular report, okay. And then the report is the 14th edition in a series that brings together many of the world's top climate scientists to look at the future trends in the greenhouse gas emissions and provide potential solutions to the challenge of the global warming. So every year this climate scientist will gather together, and then that is the responsibility of this United Nations Environment Program, okay. So they all gather together and then discuss about the greenhouse gas emissions and release a report based on the discussion, okay. So this is the 14th edition of such a report, okay. What else do we have to understand from this news? What is emission gap report? That we need to understand. What is emission gap? That we need to understand. So emission gap report is United Nations Environment Program's spotlight report, which is launched annually. Such information are also important, okay, because it is being released annually. Questions based on these information can also be asked, that whether it is released annually or biannually or biennially and other details, okay. And then it is done in advance of the annual climate negotiation. Every year climate negotiation is happening under UNFCCC. We all know that, United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change, okay. So before every climate negotiation, climate change negotiation, this report will be released annually, okay. So that is what we need to know. Next, what is this emission gap report? What is that gap here? So it tracks the gap between two things. What are they? One is where the global emissions are heading with the current country commitments. Currently countries have commitments, and where the global emissions are heading to, and then where they ought to be to limit the warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So the gap in this, between these two, is the emission gap, okay. And why 1.5 degrees Celsius? Because this was the target fixed in the Paris Agreement of 2015, okay. Again, Paris Agreement belongs to this UNFCCC, okay, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. What else do we have to understand? What are all the key highlights of the report? First thing is temperature rise, like we already saw in the first slide itself, okay. So temperature rise trajectory, what is it? So the current pledges under the Paris Agreement set the world on a course for 2.5 to 2.9 degrees Celsius temperature rise above the pre-industrial levels by the end of this century, okay. To limit the warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, substantial emission cuts of 28 to 42% by 2030 is necessary, okay. So we need to cut the emissions to the range of 28 to 42% before the year 2030. Then only we can achieve this target, that is 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius below the pre-industrial levels, okay. This is one key highlight. Next is global emission trends. How are global emission trends all over the world? First thing is the greenhouse gas emissions hit a record of 57.4 gigatons. So it is a new record, which means greenhouse gas emission is increasing, which is a major concern here. So 57.4 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2022. So in the year 2022, this much gigatons, that is 57.4 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent of greenhouse gas emissions. Generally, greenhouse gas emissions are measured in carbon dioxide equivalent, okay, CO2 equivalent, okay. In the year 2022, this has been observed, and this is 1.2 percentage increase from the previous year. This is also important. Next is the greenhouse gas emissions across the G20. Okay, across the G20 countries also increased by the same percentage, that is 1.2 percentage in the year 2022. However, members vary widely in their trends. Not all G20 countries are contributing to increase in greenhouse gas emissions, but then there are countries who are decreasing their greenhouse gas emissions also. That is also important. Okay, so the trend varies widely. How? With increase of greenhouse gas emissions in China, India, Indonesia, and United States of America, but then greenhouse gas emission is being decreased in countries like Brazil, European Union, and Russian Federation. Okay, so this is also important. These three countries or the union is decreasing, but then the countries like China, India, Indonesia, and United States are increasing its greenhouse gas emission. This is what we need to know. But on an average, there is an increase. Okay, so increase of 1.2 percentage, which means these countries are contributing a lot. Next is collectively the G20 countries accounts for 76% of the global emission. Okay, so statements like these are very important from your exam point of view. Okay, so they account for 76% of the global emissions. This is what we need to know. What else? What other highlights do we have to understand from this news article? Emissions from the major economic sectors. Okay, so there are certain economic sectors which contribute to maximum emissions. Okay, such sectors are called as major emission sectors. What are they? So emissions can be split into 5 major economic sectors. The first one is energy supply. Next is industry sector. Next is agriculture and land use change and forestry. Okay, this is the third one. Transport, buildings. So these are all the 5 major economic sectors which contribute to maximum emissions. Okay, so in the year 2022, energy supply was the largest source of emission at 20.9 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent, that is 36% of the total. And then comes industry, which is 25%, followed by agriculture, and then this land use change and forestry sector, which contributes to 18%. Next comes transport and then building. Same, in the same order. Okay, the same order, it is decreasing, which means energy supply sector has the highest emission contribution. Okay, which is emitting a lot of greenhouse gases. That is what we need to understand. And then the percentage here is 36%. Okay, so these are all the major economic sectors which is contributing to a lot of greenhouse gas emissions that we need to know. What else do we have to understand? Net zero pledges. So what are net zero pledges and are countries complying to it? This we need to understand. Although countries have made net zero pledges, none of the G20 countries are reducing emissions at the pace consistent with their targets. Okay, so net zero pledges are being made by many countries, and of the G20 countries, none of the countries are meeting their targets, which is very important. Before that, we need to understand what is this net zero concept. Net zero means net zero emission. Net zero emission of what? Greenhouse gases. So net zero means carbon dioxide emissions are still generated. Net zero does not mean that we are not going to emit carbon dioxide at all, but then carbon dioxide will be emitted, but an equal amount of carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere as is released into it. That is what is important. So the net is zero. It is not complete absolute zero, but the net is zero, which means equal amount of carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere as is released into the atmosphere, that thus resulting in zero increase in the net emission. Okay, so this target or this pledge has been made by many countries, but then they are not meeting their targets. That is what the highlight is. And then even in the most optimistic scenario, the likelihood of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is only 14%. Okay, This is a major concern. So even in the likelihood of the, I mean, in the most optimistic scenario, this is not possible. That is what they are saying, and it is just 14%. Okay, so we need to take a lot of efforts to achieve this target of limiting the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius before 20, I mean 2100. That is what the target which has been fixed by the Paris Agreement. Okay, so this is what we need to know about this emission gaps report. Okay, the topic that we are going to discuss now is sand and dust storms. So what are sand and dust storms? Why are they in news? And it is based on what convention? I mean, which convention is related to this sand and dust storms? This we need to understand. So the recent meetings of United Nations Convention on, I mean, to combat climate, sorry, to combat desertification, UNCCD. So United Nations Convention to combat desertification. This convention is what is related to this sand and dust storms. Okay, they are highlighting the dangers of sand and dust storms. Okay, so in the recent meeting, they shed light on the far-reaching consequences of the sand and dust storms and propose crucial policy recommendation to mitigate its effects. Okay, then next, what is sand and dust storm? They are meteorological events, okay, that occur when strong wind lifts the large amount of sand and dust particles from the ground and transport them over a long distance. Okay, so there is strong wind which is transporting a large amount of dust and sand particles from the ground, and then it is being transported to a large distance. Okay, even transboundary, I mean country to country travel is also happening. Okay, which is a major concern here. So they mainly affect the arid and semi-arid regions. Very important. Obviously, only in such arid and semi-arid regions you will be having such loose sand which is not bound, okay, which does not have much moisture. Okay, only such sand can be transported by heavy or strong winds. Okay, but can also impact areas far from their sources. This is also important. So it is not only restricted to arid and semi-arid regions, but it can also impact areas which is far from their source. Next is, annually over 2 billion tons of sand and dust traverse an extensive distance across the Earth's atmosphere. So this much of sand and dust is being traveled because of these winds. Such winds are called as, or such storms are called as sand and dust storms. Okay, so what are all the sources of sand and dust storms, and what are all the impacts of this storm? That is what we need to know from this news article. This can be a mains related question. Okay, next, the sources of the sand and dust storm. First thing is, according to UNCCD, this sand and dust storms are caused by both natural and anthropogenic sources, okay, or factors. So it is both natural and human. So about 75% of the global dust emissions originate from the natural sources only, from the dry lands of the world. For example, hyper-arid regions, topographic depressions, and then dry ancient lake beds. From these regions, these sand particles are being carried. Okay. Next is, the remaining 25% is obviously attributed to the human activities, because there are only two factors. One is natural and then the other is human factor. 75% is contributed by the natural factor, so the rest is contributed by the human or the anthropogenic factors. So what are all the anthropogenic causes of the sand and dust storms? First one is unsustainable agricultural practices. Okay, so activities like tillage, land clearing, and abandoned croplands, these are all the activities which is contributing to sand and dust storms. Okay, so they release dust, or they emit dust which is being carried by these strong winds. Next is, what other anthropogenic causes do we have? Land use change. Because of deforestation and urbanization, it contributes to deep stabilization of surfaces, which enhances dust emission. Okay, so when the surfaces are destabilized, it enhances the dust emission. And water diversion, this is one major cause of the sand and dust storms. How? So excessive diversion of water from the river for agriculture purpose can lead to a shrinkage of water bodies. So say for example, there is a water body, but if excessive water is being extracted from this water body for the purpose of agriculture, then that water body will shrink over a period of time. Okay, say for example, for decades, if it is being extracted, then it will shrink. Okay, so because of this shrinkage, the areas which was earlier occupied by the water will now become desert like. Okay, so desert obviously has loose sand or dust particles which will be carried. So this is how it is linked. Okay, so thus creating new source of sand and dust storms. So the best example here is the excessive diversion of water from the rivers in Central Asia over several decades toward agriculture has shrunk the Aral Sea. Okay, we all know that Aral Sea is getting smaller and smaller in its size. Earlier it was big, okay, but then it is reducing in size. Okay, that is because of this continuous extraction of water from these river sources. I mean the river which feeds the Aral Sea. Okay, so this desert like condition is happening. So it has now become Aralkum desert. So earlier it was Aral Sea, it was a big sea, but now it has become Aralkum desert. Okay, which is a significant new source of sand and dust storms in Central Asian region. Okay, so this is how it is linked, that is water diversion. Next is climate related amplifiers. Even climate related amplifiers are there, which means climate change is influencing these dust and sandstorms. Okay, so aridity and minimal precipitation are two main reasons which is related to climate change. Okay, so high air temperature and minimal precipitation and arid condition acts as drivers which amplify the likelihood and intensity of these storms. Okay, next is extreme weather events are also responsible for these dust and sandstorms. Okay, so intensified wind pattern and prolonged droughts due to climate change aggravate the severity and frequency of dust storms. So wind pattern is changing and prolonged drought all are because of this climate change only. So climate change is being a major cause for this dust and sandstorm. So you must also understand that this is also a natural cause. Okay, so climate change is also majorly natural cause, but then it is also influenced by other anthropogenic activities. That is why it has been categorized separately. We already saw natural causes, anthropogenic causes, and then we are seeing climate change because climate change is being induced naturally and also by human activities. Okay, so that is why it is a separate category here. Next is what are all the impacts of this sand and dust storm. First is soil degradation is going to happen. Okay, so sand and dust storm strip away fertile topsoil. So topsoil is there. Generally topsoil is fertile, it has nutrients, high amount of nutrient content, but then because of this sand and dust storm, this topsoil is being carried away. Okay, so it strips off the fertile topsoil, thus affecting soil quality and fertility. Next is ecosystem disruption is also happening. So because of these storms, it can alter the ecosystem by burying vegetation, disrupting natural habitats and affecting wildlife. So it buries vegetation, already existing vegetation. Say for example, a vegetation is of this height. Okay, is of this height, and if huge amount of dust is being carried, then it will spread throughout these vegetation. Okay, so thus it buries the vegetation, disrupting natural habitats and affecting wildlife also, which is dependent on these vegetation. Okay, and then invasive species can also be carried by these storms, which will affect ecosystem again. Okay, so it will outcompete the native species, thus leading to biodiversity loss and ecological imbalance. These are all the problems which are caused due to this dust and sandstorm. Okay, next is socio-economic impact. Health impact is also there. Okay, how is health impacted? Because respiratory problems might occur because of these dust and sand particles. Okay, so affecting respiratory health, causing allergies, and it also aggravates the existing conditions like asthma. People who are having asthma are at high risk of um, the problem getting aggravated because of these dust and sandstorm. Okay, next is what other socio-economic impacts do we have? Economic loss. What kind of economic loss? Because it is going to damage infrastructures. These sand and dust particles are going to impact infrastructures, reduce agriculture productivity, disrupt transportation, and increase healthcare costs. Okay, all these are going to lead to economic losses, and these events can also impact tourism and trade. Okay, because tourism and trade must be very peaceful. Okay, if it is being interrupted by such storms and other strong winds, then this also leads to economic loss. Okay, so these events can also impact tourism and trade, affecting local as well as regional economies, and there is also global implication to it. One is transboundary impact, like we discussed already. So sand and dust storms do not adhere to the geopolitical boundaries, because it does not know which is boundary or which is not. Okay, so if sand particle, if these two are the countries, sand particles and dust particles from this country might travel to this country, so it does not adhere to transboundary, I mean geopolitical boundaries, and they can cross borders affecting multiple countries. And climate change is also happening because of these dust and storm, I mean sand and dust storm. Okay, so by impacting weather patterns and potentially contributing to climate change. So climate change is a factor which is affecting this, I mean which is a factor which is responsible for this dust and sandstorm, and then the vice versa is also possible, which means these sand and dust storm is also inducing climate change, because the weather pattern is going to get affected because of these storms. Okay, so this is what we need to know about dust and sandstorm. The topic that we are going to discuss now is goldfish. Why is this goldfish in news? Let us understand that. So recently Gujarat declared black spotted croaker. This goldfish is locally, I mean, it is called as black spotted croaker, and then locally it is called as goldfish. Okay, and then Gujarat has declared this goldfish as its state fish. Okay, so that is why it is in news, and then the decision was based on various factors emphasizing its uniqueness. These fishes are unique because of its economic value and also the need for its conservation. Because of these factors, it has been given this status that it is a state fish of Gujarat. Okay, so this might be an important question. Next, what is its geographic distribution, where it is distributed, all other details we must have to understand, and what are all the benefits of eating this fish, all those details also we must have to know. So geographic distribution, this goldfish is primarily found in Indo-Pacific region, so Indian Ocean region and Pacific Ocean region. So that is Indo-Pacific region, and it inhabits spans from Persian Gulf to the expansive waters to, I mean waters of the Pacific Ocean. So from the Persian Gulf to Pacific Ocean waters, in this expansive spans, this goldfish is found. Okay, and then what are all the economic significance of goldfish? The goldfish has a substantial market demand in China and other Asian countries. Okay, and this fish is also known as sea gold because of its high market value. Okay, so which fish is called as sea gold? It is the goldfish. Okay, next is its meat is exported to European and Middle Eastern countries, and then this point is important, that its dry air bladder is in high demand, especially in China. See the rate here, it is 25,000 per kilogram. It is very costly. Okay, so its dried air bladder, I mean the fish's air bladder, dried air bladder is in high demand in China. Okay, so this is what we need to know about the economic significance. What else do we have to understand about this goldfish? What are all the benefits of this goldfish? First is it is good for eye health, thus it helps in maintaining eyesight. Next is it prevents aging and wrinkles. How does it prevent aging and wrinkles? Because it has high content, high collagen content. Okay, so it has high collagen content. This collagen is responsible for young look of a person. Okay, the tight skin is because of this collagen only. Okay, so the collagen content in this goldfish prevents the wrinkles and also keeps the elasticity of the skin intact. Okay, so elasticity will be intact. Next, Omega 3 content is high in this goldfish, which improves the intelligence quotient in children, okay, because it stimulates the growth of brain cells, okay. So these are all the benefits of goldfish. Next is, what is its conservation status? Its conservation status is near threatened under IUCN, okay. This is what we need to know about this goldfish. The topic that we are going to discuss now is carbon capture, utilization and storage. Okay, so what is this carbon capture, utilization and storage? It is actually a strategy to control greenhouse gas emission or fossil fuel. I mean the emissions due to fossil fuel burning. Okay, so let us understand the steps involved in this strategy. So recently, experts highlighted the need for investment from both government as well as industry in this carbon capture, utilization and storage strategy. Okay, so it is actually a set of technologies and processes which is aimed at mitigating carbon dioxide emission. First point, which is generated from large scale point sources. Okay, what are all the point sources that we have? Power plants, industrial facilities and refineries. These are all the large scale point sources which is responsible for high amount of greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so this is being addressed by this technology and process, that is CCUS, carbon capture, utilization and storage. Okay, the primary goal of this CCUS is to prevent CO2 from being released into the atmosphere. So carbon dioxide must not be released into the atmosphere. So the primary focus here is with respect to carbon dioxide, very important. Okay, and then it is considered as a crucial strategy for reduction of greenhouse gas emission from the industries. So industries are the focal area here. Okay, so power plants, industrial facilities and refineries all comes under industry category only. So industries are focused and then carbon dioxide emission is focused here. Okay, so what is the process involved in this carbon capture, utilization and storage? Let us understand that. There are actually 4 stages, let us consider. Okay, so first stage is capture. Let us understand, because carbon capture, utilization and storage, right? Storage. Okay, so first is capture. So this step involves capturing carbon dioxide emissions at their source. So at the source itself, this carbon dioxide emissions has to be captured before they are released into the air. Okay, next is, there are various capture technologies which includes post combustion capture, pre combustion capture and oxy-fuel combustion. These are all the technologies which is involved in capture of carbon dioxide. Okay, so a question based on this can be asked. Okay, so post combustion capture, pre combustion capture and oxy-fuel combustion, these are all the technologies involved in capturing carbon dioxide. The next step in this process is transport, because after capturing the carbon dioxide it has to be transported, right? So this step involves moving compressed carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide is captured and compressed. Okay, so the compressed carbon dioxide is transported by ship and pipelines from the point of capture to the point of storage. So the next topic or the next step here is storage, obviously. Okay, so storage, the transported carbon dioxide is stored in underground geological formations. Very important. Okay, a question based on this was already asked in UPSC prelims. Okay, so where are they stored? A question based on that was asked. Okay, so the transported carbon dioxide is stored in the underground geological formation, which include depleted oil and gas fields or deep saline aquifers. These are all the areas where it is stored, and after storage it has to be utilized. Okay, it is not only dumping the carbon dioxide, it is also utilization of that carbon dioxide. Okay, so once captured, the carbon dioxide can be utilized in various ways rather than being released into the atmosphere. So this may include how it is utilized. It is used in industrial processes which involves manufacturing of chemicals and fuels. Okay, so this is what the entire process of carbon capture, utilization and storage, or carbon capture, storage and utilization. So this is how it happens: carbon capture, utilization and storage. It is being captured here and then it is stored in these aquifers and then it is utilized, and then transportation is there everywhere. Okay, It has to be transported from here to here, and then it has to be transported from here to here. So transportation is there everywhere, but then the three important step here is capture, storage, and utilization. So this is what we need to know about this methodology or technology, which involves capturing carbon dioxide and utilizing it later. So the main aim is to abate or to eliminate carbon dioxide emission into atmosphere. Okay. The topic that we are going to discuss now is tropicalization due to climate change. Tropicalization. Okay. So what is this tropicalization and how is it induced because of climate change? This is what we need to understand. So recently a study published in the journal Trends in Ecology and Evolution has highlighted that climate change is making ocean warmer, and as a result of this, tropical marine species are shifting from equator to the polewards, okay, or they are traveling towards the pole. Okay, so this process of the marine species traveling from the equator region to the pole region or the polar region is called as tropicalization. So what is tropicalization? So climate change is causing marine phenomena which is known as tropicalization, where tropical species expand their range while temperate species are retracting. Okay, they are reducing in number, but then tropical species are expanding their range. Okay, so if we see in the globe, this is equator, this region is tropical region, and this region is temperate region. Okay, this is temperate region. So what is happening is the tropical species are traveling to temperate region because of rising temperature of waters. Okay, so this is what is happening. So temperate species are receding, they are reducing in number as it gets too warm. Okay, so such species which are present in the temperate regions are adapted to such cold conditions only. Okay, but then since the water temperature is increasing, it is getting warmer and warmer because of this climate change, those species cannot survive. Okay, so that is why its number is receding. They face increased competition from the for habitat because they are living in a habitat, but then a warm, I mean they are facing warmer conditions, which is one problem that they face, and they are also facing competition for their habitat because these species from the tropical regions are reaching temperate regions. Okay, so habitat is being affected, and then new predators are arriving on the scene. Okay, so predators from the tropical regions are entering into the temperate regions. Okay, this is also yet another problem that is being faced by the species in the temperate region. Okay, so this is a major concern which is important. Next is, this global shift is altering the ocean ecosystem biodiversity, and it could impact the global economy also. And then the first instance of such process, such tropicalization, was identified in Mediterranean Sea. That is because Mediterranean Sea is considered as the tropicalization hotspot due to increase in tropical species. Very important. Okay, so statements like this are important from exam point of view, that Mediterranean Sea is considered as the tropicalization hotspot. Okay, that is because of increase in tropical species in that region. Next is, we saw that ocean warming is the reason for this tropicalization, right? So we must have to understand what ocean warming is, what are all the sources of ocean warming, and how does it impact the global climate and other things, or the global events. Okay, so ocean absorbs most of the excess heat from the greenhouse gas emissions, which leads to rise in ocean temperatures. So the major cause here is absorption of heat from the greenhouse gas emission. What are the reasons are there for ocean warming? One is greenhouse gas emissions, that we know. Next is carbon dioxide absorption is happening. Okay, which is one of the greenhouse gases. One important thing is carbon dioxide absorption. So ocean acts as the vast reservoir which absorbs significant portion of the excess carbon dioxide from human activities, while this absorption helps to mitigate climate change. Okay, so it will mitigate climate change in the land, in the terrestrial ecosystem, but then it is causing a problem to marine ecosystem. Okay, so that we need to understand. Carbon dioxide is being emitted from the land. We human beings are emitting carbon dioxide because of many activities, and this carbon dioxide is being absorbed by the ocean, which is a good thing because it is acting as carbon sequestration. Okay, carbon sequestration is happening in the ocean, but then ocean warming is happening, that is causing a problem to marine ecosystem. Next is solar radiation is yet another reason which is responsible for ocean warming, because if solar radiation is consistent there is no problem, but then solar radiation its intensity is varying because of many human activities also. Okay, because of climate change and other factors. So that is how it impacts ocean warming. So what are all the impacts of ocean warming that we need to know? First is coral bleaching will happen. Corals will get bleached and then it will lead to coral death. Next is sea level rise. Thus, the coastal areas, the vulnerable people who are living along the coastal areas are getting affected because of sea level rise. And then disruption of marine food web. Obviously, when tropicalization happens, then it is disrupting the marine food web, and then there may be death of many species. So all these are responsible for all these are because of this ocean warming. Next is ocean acidification is also possible because of this ocean warming. How? The absorption of excess carbon dioxide. Excess carbon dioxide is being absorbed, right? So the absorption of excess carbon dioxide by ocean leads to ocean acidification. So acidification can harm marine organisms which are with calcium carbonate skeleton or shell. Okay, so those marine organisms which are there with these calcium carbonate shell or skeleton are being mostly affected by this ocean acidification, which includes these corals, mollusks, and then some planktons also, which affect the entire marine food chain. So this is the impacts. These are all the impacts of global ocean warming. Okay. The topic that we are going to discuss now is Lantana Camara. So what is this Lantana Camara? Let us understand that quickly. So recently 15 elephant figurines created from toxic invasive plant species, that is Lantana Camara, are currently on display outside the Vidhan Sauda or the Vidhan Sabha, that is the Legislative Assembly in Bengaluru, Karnataka's Legislative Assembly. There it is being displayed, okay, as a showcase. Okay, so what is this Lantana? Lantana Camara is a perennial shrub which is native to American tropical areas, okay, American tropics, and it belongs to Verbenaceae family, very important. And then with the ability to adapt to changing climates, they are having this ability to adapt to changing climate. They can tolerate high temperature and moisture. These Lantana species can tolerate high temperature and moisture. However, it is one of the world's 10 worst invasive species and a species of high concern for India. Though it is having such ability to live in various conditions, but it is a invasive species which is causing a problem to native species. Okay, so that is what we need to understand about this Lantana Camara. And then why it is in the news? It is because 15 elephant figurines has been made using this Lantana Camara. And where is it located? Where it is displayed? It is displayed outside Vidhan Sauda. So this is how it is made. The elephant figurines are made using this Lantana Camara and people are watching it. Next is Lantanas arrived in India as a decorative shrub. Actually, it was introduced as a decorative shrub. See how beautiful the flowers are. It is a beautiful flower, but then it is a invasive species here. So it was introduced as a decorative shrub during colonial period, but quickly took over several ecosystems as invasive plant. So it is an invasive plant. And then this point is very important, that Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve in Western Ghats is one of the largest impacted hotspot areas due to invasion of this invasion due to this Lantana Camara. Okay, so Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve has been worstly affected by the invasion of this Lantana Camara. Many native species in Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve was affected because of this invasive species. Okay, so this is what we need to understand about this particular topic, that is Lantana Camara. With this, we come to end of this particular session. I hope you found the session to be very useful and informative. Let us see in the next session. Thank you.